Listen carefully, not to the vocabulary or the accents, but to the moves. In real professional debates, people don't win because their English is better. They win by controlling the situation. They sound confident, guide emotions, and make weak ideas sound strong. When you learn to hear these moves in real time, your English reaches a new level. You stop understanding only words and start understanding intent. You respond like a strategist. Welcome to Feel Learns English. If you want more advanced listening like this, like the video, subscribe, and comment on what you want to improve most: listening, speaking, or critical thinking. That helps me design future sessions for you. Here's how today's lesson works. You'll hear a short debate. I'll pause and say pause, and you will answer out loud in English. Even if you're alone or unsure, speaking forces your brain to organize ideas quickly, just like in meetings or interviews. After that, I'll show you a strong, professional response that works in real-life situations. One simple rule: track 3 things: the claim, the reason, and the move. The claim is what the speaker wants you to believe. The reason is how they justify it. The move is the technique they use to win. Some moves are fair, like using evidence. Others are manipulative, like attacking someone's character or creating false choices. Your goal is to hear the move. Now, imagine a business conference. The topic is hiring. The question is whether companies should use AI to screen job candidates. One speaker supports speed and efficiency. The other worries about fairness and accountability. During the debate, Jordan says people who disagree just don't like change. This is not a real answer to the concern. It's a motive attack, also called an ad hominem. He attacks the person instead of the argument. A strong professional response would be, I'm not resisting change. I'm asking for standards. If a tool affects real careers, we need transparency, accountability, and a clear appeal process. Later, Jordan asks, what's the alternative? Hire 10 more recruiters. This is a false dilemma. He presents only 2 options when there are actually more. A calm response is, there are more than 2 options. AI can support humans, not replace them. We can review borderline cases and regularly check fairness. It treats the screening system as correct by default. That thinking is circular. Passing the screen only means you fit the screen's rules. It does not prove you are truly qualified. If the system is flawed, it can reject strong candidates, and we may never notice unless we test the results. Now, practice executive-level language. Speak calmly, like you're in a meeting. Separate speed from fairness. The goal is not automation, but better decisions. Claims need evidence, not assumptions. This is not a choice between 2 options. There are more possibilities. I understand the benefit, but my focus is on safeguards. Auditable does not mean audited. If we use this system, we need accountability. Next, let's strengthen both sides. Jordan's best fair argument is this: bias is a real concern, which is why AI should support decisions, not replace humans. Results should be audited, fairness measured, and humans should always have final control. Used correctly, AI can reduce inconsistency and give recruiters more time for real evaluation. Layla's strongest fair argument is this: tools are not the problem. Lack of accountability is. If AI is used, candidates need transparency, a way to appeal decisions, and regular public audits. Without this, bias grows while being labeled efficiency. In real debates, people interrupt and misrepresent your position. For example, when Jordan says, "So you want perfection before progress," that is a straw man. He turns a request for safeguards into an extreme demand. A strong response is, that's not my position. I'm asking for minimum standards, not perfection. We can move forward while protecting people. Now try quick responses. That's just fear. It's not fear. It's risk management. Everyone is biased, so it doesn't matter. Bias existing everywhere means we need measurement and accountability. We don't have time for this. If we don't have time to do it responsibly, we don't have time to use it at all. As debates get more intense, stay focused. Track the claim, the reason, and the move. Your goal is not to win an argument, but to understand clearly and respond professionally. Delaying action can create more instability than acting too slowly. Sam says no one is suggesting doing nothing and argues for investing in scalable solutions. When Ethan pauses the debate, he asks each speaker to name the strongest point from the other side and then respond. Sam says rushed policies always backfire. The problem is the word always. Absolute claims are risky in professional debate unless they are supported by strong evidence. Nora can respond calmly by saying that the issue is not speed, but design. With the right conditions and protections, fast action does not have to be reckless. Sam also warns that fast change can cause economic instability. This can sound like a slippery slope because it jumps from speed to disaster without showing clear steps in between. A strong response is to accept that risk exists, but explain that policies can be phased, adjusted, and monitored. The focus should be on settings and safeguards, not worst-case fears. When Sam says, "Nobody is saying do nothing," he pushes back on Nora's framing. Nora slightly misrepresented his point, and in high-level debate, accuracy builds trust. A better version of her argument is to agree that innovation matters, but emphasize timing. Innovation takes time, while pricing can change behavior faster. This leads to steelmaning. Steelmaning means clearly and fairly stating the other side's strongest argument before responding. It sounds calm, confident, and professional. Nora can say Sam's strongest point is political support. If costs rise without protection, policies fail. Sam can say Nora's strongest point is speed. Delay increases long-term costs. Strong connector language helps here. I see your point, but here's my concern. That's valid. Let's define conditions. I agree with the goal, not the method. Neutralizing emotional words also matters. Punishing families becomes increasing household costs. Irreversible damage becomes higher long-term risk. Mentorship, creativity, and alignment don't always appear in dashboards. Anya agrees these matter, but points out that saying culture is collapsing is a feeling, not a measurement. She argues that mentorship systems can be built without forcing long commutes. Derek responds that without a mandate the office will be empty, money will be wasted, and culture will die. Anya calls this a slippery slope and reminds everyone that teams are different. A flexible approach by function may work better. When Derek says convenience isn't a strategy, he is using a rhetorical punchline. It sounds strong, but it isn't evidence. A professional response is to shift the focus to outcomes. Culture should be defined in measurable terms, such as onboarding speed, mentorship time, collaboration, and retention, and then policy should support those results. When Derek warns that culture will die completely, he is using fear framing and absolute language. A calm response is to acknowledge the concern but reject the exaggeration. Culture depends on leadership and systems, not only location. Testing, piloting, and measuring results is safer than a blanket mandate. Anya also needs to be careful with tone. Saying your argument is basically how I feel risks sounding dismissive. A better approach is to respect the concern while asking for data and shared definitions, then choosing the least disruptive policy that achieves the goal. Strong executive language helps keep debates productive, separate preference from performance, define measurable goals, test assumptions, and pilot before deciding. When you hear tactics like labeling, fear language, or false dilemmas, name them calmly and upgrade the argument. The key lesson is this: you don't need complex vocabulary to sound advanced. You need structure, calm thinking, and professional phrasing. That's what makes C1 and C2 speakers sound confident and credible, especially when debates move fast and pressure is high. It's true that many competitors are using this approach, but we still need to check whether it fits our goals. What problem does it solve for us, and what are the risks and costs? Next example. A panelist says, "I don't trust this idea because the presenter failed before." This is an ad hominem move, also called guilt by history. Past failure does not automatically make a current idea wrong. A stronger response is to focus on the proposal itself and discuss specific weaknesses with evidence. Another speaker says, "If we allow this small change, we'll soon lose control." This is a slippery slope argument. It jumps to the worst outcome without showing the steps. A professional reply is to ask for the chain of events and discuss safeguards instead of assuming disaster. When someone says, "This is common sense, we don't need data," they are shutting down evidence. Common sense can fail in complex situations. A better response is to define success, collect data, and test whether intuition matches reality. Now we move to framing. When a speaker says, "We're not cutting the budget, we're optimizing resources," they are using soft language to reduce resistance. A balanced response is to ask what is actually changing and what the impact will be. When someone says, "This isn't about control, it's about alignment," they are rebranding. Alignment should be defined in clear actions and decision rights to avoid sounding manipulative. In the final debate, the topic is anonymous feedback at work. Elena wants to ban it, saying it creates toxicity. Marcus argues it protects people when power imbalances exist. When Elena says, "People who want anonymity have something to hide," she attacks motives instead of addressing the argument. A calm response is to focus on systems and safeguards, not intent. When she says anonymity always leads to bad behavior, that's a slippery slope. Abuse is a risk, but it can be managed with clear rules and moderation. The key takeaway is the same: stay calm, name the move, and bring the discussion back to structure, evidence, and solutions. We can require clear examples, enforce rules for respectful language, and track repeated issues without revealing identities. When Marcus says, "Power dynamics exist," people stay silent when they fear consequences. That is not a fallacy. It's a reality check based on workplace experience. To make it stronger, add limits and evidence. In many organizations, direct feedback is risky for junior staff. Anonymous channels can surface problems early, but they need moderation, clear rules, and leaders who respond with action, not defensiveness. Practice these executive-level lines with a calm tone. "I understand the intention, but the assumption doesn't hold." Let's separate risk from inevitability. That's a claim about motives, not evidence. I agree accountability matters, and here's how we can build it. The issue isn't whether feedback exists, it's how it's designed and used. If we remove the channel, we may remove the signal, not the problem. Now a quick drill. That's just your opinion. Then let's add evidence and define success criteria. If you can't prove it, it's not real. Not everything is measurable at once, but we can test indicators over time. We tried that before and it failed. Context changes. Let's learn from the failure and redesign. You're now working on a higher skill, responding when someone sounds reasonable, but their logic is still weak. This is where advanced speakers stand out. Use the missing link question. Ask what must be true for their claim to hold. Weak arguments often skip this step. In the product debate, Kai says delaying will let competitors take the market. The right response is to ask for evidence. What data shows 2 weeks is the critical window? Are there customer signals or hard deadlines? If urgency isn't proven, quality should guide the timeline. When Kai says bugs are normal, the weakness is vagueness. Minor bugs are normal, but failures are not. Define severity and decide if the risk is acceptable. When he says perfect is the enemy of good, that's a slogan. The calm upgrade is to agree on a minimum standard. Stability isn't perfection, it's the baseline. Notice how executive language keeps conflict low. We agree on the goal. We're debating risk. Let's define success. Let's define failure. Ask clear questions. What evidence supports this timeline? What are the trade-offs? And how will we reduce risk? Now the difficulty increases. This debate focuses on numbers, which often sound convincing, but can be misleading. The setting is a finance meeting about cutting marketing spend. Olivia wants to cut 20% to control rising costs. Hassan argues that marketing affects future revenue and cutting it now could hurt the pipeline later. Olivia says revenue didn't grow last quarter, so marketing isn't working. The problem is that this jumps to a conclusion too quickly. One quarter is not enough to judge impact. Revenue depends on many factors like timing, pricing, and market conditions. A stronger response is to look at leading indicators such as pipeline growth, conversion rates, and customer acquisition cost before deciding. Olivia also says that if impact can't be proven, spending should stop. The hidden issue is that this sets an unrealistic standard. Not everything can be measured perfectly. A better approach is to improve measurement, set clear KPIs, test results over time, and cut only if performance stays below an agreed threshold. This leads to a useful skill called conditional agreement. You agree in principle, but only if conditions are met. For example, I'm open to this if we define success clearly, or I can support it if we measure outcomes and set limits. Some people talk fast, stack many points, and interrupt so you can't answer everything. This forces you into defense. Your job is to slow the conversation down, choose one point, and respond clearly. You don't raise your voice. You reset the structure. Use an anchor sentence to do this. Say things like, let's take this one point at a time, or I want to focus on the core issue, or I'll respond, but first let's clarify the assumption. One calm sentence can take control of the room. In the leadership debate, Victor keeps interrupting and pushing urgency. When he calls Grace's concern fear talk, he's framing risk analysis as weakness. A strong response is to reframe it as risk, not emotion, and ask for a clear decision rule. This keeps the discussion professional. When Victor says, everyone says their project is essential, he's using a cynical generalization to dismiss details. The best response is partial agreement followed by structure. Accept the point, then demand clear criteria and measurable ranking. When Victor brings up last quarter to attack Grace's credibility, he shifts away from the real issue. A strong response pulls the conversation back to the present and asks for better criteria instead of personal accusations. Later, Victor lists a confident chain of outcomes and says it's the only path. This is a series of unsupported claims and a false dilemma. The advanced response is to ask which link in the chain is supported by evidence and over what time frame. To handle interruptions, use two polite strategies. The bridge acknowledges and redirects. I hear you. Let me finish this point. The boundary sets a rule. We need to take turns to make a decision. Calm structure, not volume, is how you regain control. Now we move to a high-pressure panel discussion. Data privacy versus personalization. One speaker uses rapid-fire questions to trap the other, forcing them into the speaker's frame. Moderator Ollie leads the discussion. Tessa supports privacy limits. Ryan supports personalization. Tessa explains that users should control their data, collection should be minimal, and consent must be clear. Ryan fires multiple quick questions. Do you use maps? Recommendations? Autocomplete? Who decides? How do you enforce it? The danger of this rapid-fire style is that it pressures you to respond emotionally. The professional approach is to stop the flood and anchor. Tessa says, "I'll answer one question at a time because stacking questions doesn't create clarity." She focuses on consent and necessity. Users should know what is collected, why, and have real choice. Personalization can coexist with privacy if data is minimized and anonymized. Ryan's question, "Do you want apps to be dumb and useless?" is loaded language and a false dilemma. A professional response widens the options. Personalization can exist responsibly with opt-in settings, local processing, and minimal data collection. Ryan also used real examples like maps and recommendations, which is effective rhetoric. The key response is the missing link question. What evidence shows strict privacy makes these tools impossible? Anchor sentences are crucial for control. For example, "It's not a yes or no issue. I'll answer with conditions." I'm addressing the core point by clarifying the frame. Complexity is why we need clear principles, not why we abandon them. Finally, you combine all skills, multi-topic debates with slogans, numbers, emotion, and interruptions. Track the claim, reason, and move, and respond in one clean, professional sentence. For example, in a town hall about performance-based pay, Martin explains the plan to reward high performers and reduce non-essential spending. Jada points out that unclear messaging and reduced benefits hurt trust, retention, and performance. Ben interrupts with confident sound bites. Your task: stay calm, anchor your responses, name the rhetorical moves, and give precise, constructive answers. This is how listening becomes leadership-level action, not just understanding. In this panel on performance-based pay, leaders argue about trust, fairness, and metrics. Ben, Martin, and Jada all speak, but Ben interrupts often and uses slogans to dominate. Ben, "Trust doesn't pay the bills. Adapt or fall behind." Move, slogan plus false dilemma. Upgrade response. Financial stability matters, and trust supports stability. If trust drops, costs rise. Let's explore options that protect both budget and credibility. Martin, "We're not cutting pay. We're modernizing compensation." Move, euphemism. Upgrade response. Modernizing can mean many things. What changes for an average employee? For top performers? What protections exist for less measurable roles? Ben, "Criteria are obvious. Results. Deliver or fail." Move, oversimplification. Upgrade response. Results matter, but we need clear definitions. How do we measure collaboration, mentorship, long-cycle projects? Without clear metrics, we reward visibility, not value. Jada, "You punish invisible work." Move, reality check. Upgrade response. High-impact tasks, training new hires, preventing failures, supporting cross-team work are often invisible. Evaluation should consider both outcomes and contributions, with audits for fairness. Ben, "Bias is everywhere. Life happens. New system is still better." Move, resignation framing to avoid accountability. Upgrade response. Bias exists, which is why measurement matters. We should audit outcomes, publish distributions, and adjust processes if patterns show unfairness. Key C2 skills. Anchor sentence. When points are stacked, pick the strongest one. I'm going to respond to one point because that's the decision driver. Numbers trap. If someone dismisses models. Move, anti-analysis framing. Upgrade response. Models show assumptions and risks. Let's clarify what they include before making decisions. Stay calm, precise, and structured. Don't respond emotionally, and always translate slogans or simplified statements into measurable, actionable terms. This approach keeps discussion professional, ensures fairness, and lets you maintain control even under high-pressure interruptions. We continue with advanced debate skills. The focus is staying calm, analyzing moves, and responding professionally even under pressure, interruptions, or loaded language. Example: Ben says, "This is what winners do." Winners adapt. Losers complain. Move: identity labeling and emotional pressure. Response: strong teams challenge decisions respectfully. Disagreement is responsibility, not weakness. Speed matters, but we still check for unintended consequences. Rapid response drill. If we don't do this, we're doomed. That's a prediction. What evidence supports it, and when could it be false? Everyone agrees with me. Consensus can help, but let's still test the logic and assumptions. You're making this too complicated. Complexity is reality. We simplify responsibly, not ignore details. Next, we build your personal response library, ready-to-use sentences for meetings, interviews, and debates. It turns advanced listening into advanced speaking. Organize it into 5 categories. 1. Clarify. Slow the room down. Remove confusion. When you say that, what exactly do you mean? Can you define that term? Are we talking short-term or long-term impact? What does success look like in measurable terms? 2. Challenge. Professional, not attacking. I'm not seeing the link between those points. Can you walk me through your reasoning? That conclusion feels stronger than the evidence. What's the basis? I see a risk in that approach. Let's examine it. 3. Reframe. Shift the debate without changing the topic. The question isn't whether we do it, it's how we do it responsibly. This isn't a yes/no issue, it's a conditions issue. The trade-off is speed versus risk, not speed versus nothing. 4. Request evidence. Sounds smart without attacking. What evidence supports that? Do we have an example or data? What would we expect to see if this claim is correct or wrong? Can we test this with a small pilot? 5. Propose a next step. Solve problems, don't just criticize. Let's pilot it for 4 weeks and measure outcomes. Let's define guardrails and revisit after results. Let's list options, evaluate trade-offs, and agree on criteria before deciding. Let's document assumptions, assign an owner, and set a decision timeline. Debate 7. Client negotiation. Scenario: the client wants lower price and faster delivery. Your team wants to protect quality and margin. Key tactics and responses. Client threat/comparison. Other vendors can do it. If you can't, maybe you're not the right partner. Move. Pressure, subtle threat. Response: I understand the comparison. Let's fairly evaluate scope and quality standards, not just promises. We can discuss trade-offs, but we won't risk delivery failure. Reframing realism. Realistic is just another word for slow. Move. Reframes realism as incompetence. Response. Realistic means reliable. Committing to an unrealistic timeline risks delays and rework. Let's map the timeline, identify bottlenecks, and see what can be accelerated safely. Prioritization structure. Let's define what matters most: scope, timeline, price, or quality. Move. Introduces structure, creates control. Upgrade. I hear you on all 4. Most projects require trade-offs. Let's identify your top priority and see which constraints are flexible. Trade-off presentation. C2 language. We can meet your goal if we adjust constraints. Accelerate delivery by reducing scope or adding resources. If we add resources, the price changes. If we keep the price, timeline changes. Let's propose 3 options and you choose the one that fits priorities. Binary trap. So you're saying you can't do it? Move. Forces yes/no framing. Response. We can do it under certain conditions. The question is which trade-off you prefer. Final, reusable lines. Let's make decisions based on facts, not pressure. We can commit to quality and speed if scope is adjusted. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Let's agree on criteria and choose the best option. Interview skills. Debate in disguise. Interviews are structured debates. The interviewer tests logic, judgment, and composure. Advanced candidates answer the concern behind the question, not the literal question. Template for tough questions. Context. Briefly describe the situation. Reasoning. Explain your concern or approach. Action. Describe what you did. Outcome. Summarize the results. Learning. What you gained from the experience. Example. Question. Tell me about a time you disagreed with a decision. Response. In my last role, our team planned to launch a feature quickly to meet a marketing deadline. I was concerned about quality risk. I agreed with the goal but challenged the timeline based on user impact and support load. I gathered past data, identified likely failure points, and proposed a narrower scope. We aligned on clear quality criteria, shipped a stable version, and avoided spikes in customer complaints. I learned that disagreement lands well when tied to shared goals and supported by evidence. Conditional commitment for follow-ups. Interviewer. What if your manager still disagreed? Response. If we still disagree after reviewing evidence, I support the final decision but document the assumptions and risks for future reference. This version condenses Debate 7 and the interview practice into a clear, professional, medium-length guide, keeping all key moves, responses, and C2 level language intact. Advanced interview skills. Handling tricky questions. In interviews, questions are often debates in disguise. The interviewer tests logic, judgment, self-awareness, and composure. Your goal is to hear the move, then answer inside a strong, structured frame. 1. Disagreement/risk management. Interviewer. What if your manager disagreed with you? Response. Conditional commitment. I document risks and propose mitigation. I define success metrics to adjust quickly if risks arise. Even if my preference doesn't win, the outcome is protected. I don't fight the manager, I protect the project. That's what leaders do. 2. Failure/accountability. Interviewer. Tell me about a time you failed. Response structure. Honest, specific, framed as learning and system improvement, not incompetence. Early in a project, I underestimated cross-team alignment and pushed forward too quickly. Dependencies weren't clear, causing delays. I took ownership, created a stakeholder map, set weekly checkpoints, and made the decision process explicit. The project recovered, and the process became a template for future work. The lesson: speed without alignment creates hidden delays. Follow-up. How do you know it was your fault? Response. I don't control everything, but I own what I can influence. I could have identified dependencies earlier and communicated more clearly. Even with other factors, my focus was reducing uncertainty. 3. Decisions with incomplete data. Interviewer. You say you're data-driven, but data is sometimes incomplete. How do you decide? Response. I make assumptions explicit, what I know, don't know, and what would change my decision. I choose the lowest risk actionable option. If the decision is reversible, I experiment quickly. If irreversible, I gather more evidence. The goal is responsible decisions under uncertainty. Example: short A/B test for onboarding flows, set guardrails, reviewed qualitative feedback, shipped the better option, and scheduled follow-up review. Structure, assumptions, reversibility, guardrails, feedback loops. 4. Leadership versus individual contribution. Question: are you more of a leader or individual contributor? Response: widen options. I'm comfortable doing both. I lead when alignment and decisions are needed, and contribute deeply when analysis or execution requires focus. Leadership is how you clarify goals and help others deliver, not just a title. Credibility test. You've never managed people directly, right? Response: evidence-based. I've led cross-functional initiatives, mentored teammates, and driven decisions through influence. For example, I coordinated stakeholders across product, engineering, and support, set shared metrics, and kept teams aligned. Leadership is creating clarity and momentum, which I've done consistently. 5. Common interview frames and responses. Frame. Trap. Strong response. Why should we hire you? Listing adjectives. I deliver results in complex situations, communicate clearly, prioritize intelligently, and make evidence-based decisions. Example. One-sentence proof. What's your weakness? Fake answer. I sometimes move too fast when confident, so I validate assumptions early and set checkpoints before major decisions. Why do you want this job? Generic. I'm excited because it aligns with solving ambiguous problems using data and communication. I respect your team's decision process and want to contribute to clarity and impact. 6. Interview control lines, shadow, and practice. That's a great question. Let me think for a second. I want to answer clearly. I'll start with context, then outcome. The main trade-off was speed versus risk. Here's the assumption I challenged. Data wasn't perfect, so we set guardrails. If I could do it again, I would do one thing differently. What I learned was 7. Rapid 5-second drills. Question. Model response. Why did you leave your last job? I was looking for a role with more scope and impact where I could grow and contribute at a higher level. Tell me about conflict. I focus on shared goals, clarify assumptions, and propose measurable plans. Conflict decreases when the decision process is clear. Tell me about a challenging decision. Follow template. Context reasoning action outcome learning. This version condenses your interview debate training into a structured, medium-length guide with C2, level phrasing, framing, and rapid response drills ready for practice. Advanced listening and reflex debate training. In this segment, we practice microclip reflexes. Each clip is 8 to 12 seconds. Your task: label the move in one word, then respond with one calm, structured sentence. This builds reflexive analysis and professional response under pressure. Microclip workout. We all know this is the right direction, so let's stop questioning it. Move. Appeal to certainty. Response. Confidence is fine, but certainty needs evidence. Let's define what would prove this direction works and what would prove it doesn't. I've been doing this for 20 years, so trust me. Move. Appeal to authority. Response. Experience matters, but I'd like to understand the reasoning and see examples to apply it correctly in this context. If you care about people, you'll support this policy. Move. Moral blackmail. Response. I care about people, which is why I want to examine outcomes and unintended consequences, not just intentions. This one study proves it, so the debate is over. Move. Overclaiming evidence. Response. One study is a data point, not a verdict. Let's look at broader evidence and its limitations. That's just your opinion, so it doesn't matter. Move. Dismissal. Response. It is an opinion, so let's test it against data and define criteria that would support or reject it. We tried something similar once and it failed, so this will fail too. Move. Hasty generalization. Response. Past failure is useful. Let's identify causes and see whether conditions have changed, then redesign accordingly. If we don't take action now, we'll lose everything. Move. Catastrophizing. Response. That's a strong prediction. Let's quantify the risk and compare options instead of assuming the worst case is guaranteed. Everyone agrees, so why are you the only one resisting? Move. Social pressure. Response. Consensus can help, but it doesn't replace reasoning. I want to understand the assumptions and evidence behind it. You're either with us or against us. Move. False dilemma. Response. I'm focused on outcomes, not sides. Let's explore alternatives and pick the option with the best trade-offs. We can't afford to be perfect, so accept whatever we get. Move, straw man of perfection. Response: I'm not asking for perfection. Let's define a minimum acceptable standard and ship when we meet it. Two-layer response training. The highest level responses combine. Layer 1, agreement or acknowledgement. Layer 2, correction, challenge, or refinement. Examples: we need to move fast. I agree, speed matters. To move fast responsibly, we need clear guardrails to avoid rework. This is too complex. I agree. That's why we need simple principles and a clear decision process. We don't have data. I agree. The data is limited. Let's run a small test and use leading indicators. Practice lines. I agree with the goal. I'm challenging the method. I hear the urgency. I'm protecting the outcome. I accept the constraint. I'm proposing a smarter trade-off. I understand the concern. I'm asking for evidence. Debate 8. Education policy. Topic: should universities require standardized tests? Moderator: Kevin. PRIA supports tests. Standardized tests provide a consistent signal across applicants. Without them, admissions risk being less transparent and more subjective. Fairness requires measurable standards. Daniel: tests optional. Tests measure some skills, but also reflect access and preparation. Optional tests reduce barriers and allow more holistic evaluation. Training point: focus on logic, framing, and professional argumentation, not the topic itself. This version condenses your microclip reflex training, two-layer responses, and a professional debate example into a structured, medium-length guide ready for practice. Advanced policy debate and mini-debate training education policy example, standardized tests. PRIA, holistic evaluation can sound fair, but it can hide bias. When criteria are unclear, the process becomes less accountable. Daniel, holistic doesn't mean unclear. We can create clear rubrics and evaluate multiple indicators: grades, coursework, rigor, writing, recommendations, and context. PRIA, grades vary across schools. A test gives a common benchmark. Daniel, benchmarks are only useful if valid and equitable. If they correlate with income and coaching, they reinforce inequality. Analysis. Strong. PRIA emphasizes fairness and accountability. Missing. Assumes tests are the best standard. Upgraded response. Two-layer. I agree, measurable standards matter. The question is which standards are most valid and least biased. We can use multiple measures and clear rubrics to improve fairness without relying on a single test score. Risk. Daniel risks dismissing measurement entirely. Upgrade. Access affects scores. If tests are used, limit their weight, offer fee waivers and preparation support, and evaluate scores in context, not as a single gatekeeper. PRIA's concern: holistic evaluation can hide bias. Upgrade. Holistic review introduces subjectivity. Requires structured rubrics, reviewer training, and audits to detect unfair patterns. This protects fairness, whether tests are optional or required. Key point: both sides can be intelligent and fair. The difference is defining terms and guardrails. High-level debaters design solutions, not just attack. Shadow lines. I agree with the intention. I'm concerned about the mechanism. Let's define fairness in measurable terms. A single metric is efficient but can be distortive. Multiple measures reduce error. Audit outcomes. Don't just announce principles. Mini-debate exercise. Build your own. Format. 2 short arguments, each with claim, the position. Reason, why it matters. Safeguard. Shows risk awareness, limits, and accountability. Example 1. Cameras in remote meetings. 4. Claim. Cameras improve engagement and reduce miscommunication. Reason. Visual cues help read reactions, avoid interruptions, and build trust. Safeguard: use cameras only for critical meetings. Allow exceptions for privacy, bandwidth, and personal needs. Against: claim: cameras reduce psychological safety and increase fatigue. Reason: forced visibility can make people feel monitored or judged. Safeguard: leaders can improve engagement via clear agendas, turn-taking, interactive questions, and optional camera norms. Example 2. AI writing tools in universities. 4. Claim: restrict AI tools to ensure students develop original skills. Reason: AI can replace mental effort needed to build competence. Assessment becomes unreliable. Safeguard: apply restrictions to high-stakes assignments and teach ethical AI use. Against: claim: do not ban AI. Students must learn responsible use. Reason: bans push usage underground and create unfairness. Safeguard: require disclosure of AI use. Design assignments evaluating reasoning, drafts, reflection, not just final text. Key point: arguing both sides strengthens critical thinking, prevents traps, and allows you to respond calmly under pressure. Listening to speaking conversion drill. Convert pressure statements into fair, structured responses. Line: cameras build culture. Convert: cameras can support culture in certain meetings by improving connection. Culture also depends on leadership, clarity, and trust. Use cameras strategically, not as a blanket rule. Line: AI is cheating. Convert: AI can support learning if used transparently. The question is how students use it responsibly and how assignments evaluate understanding, not just output. This version condenses your training content into a structured, practice-ready guide, showing both analysis of debate moves and production of professional C2 level arguments. Advanced English debate and listening training. Final segment: line conversion practice. Line: AI is cheating. Convert: AI can be misused as a shortcut, but it can also be a learning tool. The key is defining ethical use, disclosure, and assignment design. Line: tests are fair because they're the same for everyone. Convert: standardization creates consistency, but fairness also depends on access and validity. We should evaluate both consistency and equity. 1-minute dissection. Fast thinking under pressure. Goal: identify moves, then upgrade them to professional, structured responses. Clip: if you disagree with this plan, you're afraid of change. We don't have time to debate. The market is moving, adapt now or get left behind. And people pushing back haven't delivered results anyway. Moves: motive attack, false dilemma, urgency, pressure, credibility attack. Upgrade: I hear the urgency. Let's focus on the strongest concern and evaluate evidence. If the plan is sound, it should hold up under questions. We can move quickly by agreeing on criteria, risks, and a mitigation plan with clear checkpoints. Clip: one report shows this strategy works. Anyone who doubts it is ignoring facts. If we don't implement it exactly, we're sabotaging success. Moves: overclaiming evidence, labeling dissent, perfection framing. Upgrade: one report is a useful input, but we should review multiple sources and test fit in our context. We can pilot the strategy, measure results, and adjust based on data rather than assuming one document is universal truth. Clip: we've always done it this way. It's common sense. Every expert agrees. So why waste time? Moves: appeal to tradition, appeal to common sense, appeal to authority, time pressure. Upgrade: past practice can be a useful baseline, but conditions change. Let's define what we're optimizing for, review evidence, and test whether the current approach delivers the best outcomes. Closing power lines. Leadership English. Repeat and internalize. I'm open to changing my mind if the evidence is strong. Let's focus on the decision criteria. Let's clarify assumptions before committing. I hear the urgency and I want to protect the outcome. We can move fast with checkpoints. Let's test the idea instead of arguing about it. We're aligned on the goal. We're debating the method. Skill. You're training to think in English under pressure. This builds executive-level reasoning and communication. Deep listening passage, professional tone. Goal. Hear disagreement, hedging, concession, and sharpening without sounding rude. Scenario. Senior colleagues discuss a market expansion. Moderator, Lena. Optimist, Eric. Cautious, Sana. Lena, should we greenlight expansion in Q2 or revisit in Q3? Eric, can you walk us through moving now? Eric, the opportunity is real and timing is favorable. Demand signals are strong, inbound interest exists, and competitors aren't fully established. Acting now lets us build a foothold early, learn fast, and iterate before the market gets crowded. Lena, Sana, your reaction? Sana, I agree the opportunity is promising. I'm not disputing that. My concern is whether we're underestimating execution costs and risks to our core business. Expansion sounds exciting, but stretching teams too thin could reduce momentum in our current markets. Observation. Eric highlights opportunity and urgency. Sana acknowledges the opportunity, hedge/concession, while raising risk, precision, accountability. Both use professional C1, C2 hedging. I agree, and sounds exciting, but training takeaway, listening and responding with precision under uncertainty is what separates professional English from casual fluency. Advanced negotiation and deep listening, expansion scenario dialogue highlights. Scenario, Eric, optimist, and Sana, cautious, negotiate a market expansion. Lena, moderates. Concession and hedging. Sana, I agree. The opportunity looks promising. My concern is execution cost and risk to the core business. Eric, that's fair. I don't want to pretend there's no risk, but I think it's manageable if we scope properly. Key C2 insight. Hedge language and acknowledge the other's point before introducing your own, creating collaboration without losing your position. Clarity and metrics. Sana, what exactly are we learning and how will we decide whether the learning justifies the cost? Eric, when I say pilot, I mean we define success metrics up front, set guardrails, and have a kill switch if numbers don't hold. Key C2 insight. Always clarify assumptions and define measurable criteria. Trade-offs and differentiation. Sana, we're treating competitor presence as a reason to move fast. Is speed the right driver? Eric, speed without differentiation is noise. Our differentiation is workflow integration and simple pricing. Proof matters, not just confidence. Key C2 insight. Identify core constraints and distinguish signal from noise. Highlight evidence over assumption. Ownership and risk control. Sana, we need a clear threshold for impact and a real owner with decision authority. Eric, agreed. I can propose a directly responsible individual, DRI, with weekly review and clear escalation. Sana, some people act as if expansion is obvious. It's a bet. Bets need risk control. Eric, I'm comfortable calling it a bet. If the data doesn't support it, we stop. Key C2 insight. Assign accountability, define stop conditions, and normalize risk-managed course correction. Trade-offs transparency. Sana, every yes is a no to something else. Eric, that's a legitimate risk. We would delay to internal improvements and limit sales focus. Key C2 insight. State trade-offs explicitly so decisions are data-informed and transparent. Key C2 phrases to shadow. I agree. The opportunity looks promising. I'm not disputing that. My concern is execution cost and risk to the core business. That's fair. I don't want to pretend there's no risk. Let me clarify. When I say pilot, I mean explicit metrics and guardrails. Every yes is a no to something else. That's a legitimate risk. What would you need to see to feel comfortable? Some people are speaking as if it's obvious. It's a bet. Bets need risk control. I'm not attached emotionally. If the data doesn't support it, we stop. Let's design the plan to make stopping normal. Observation. Notice their avoidance of absolute language. Always, never, everyone. Instead, they use likely, may, tends to, in practice often, signaling awareness of uncertainty and professionalism. C2 drill. Converting absolute language. Absolute. Professional upgrade. This will definitely work. This has a strong chance of working if our assumptions hold. This will never work. I'm skeptical this will work under current conditions. Everyone agrees. There seems to be alignment, but I'd still like to test the reasoning. C2 insight. Avoiding absolutes shows critical thinking, accountability, and an understanding of uncertainty, hallmarks of professional English under pressure. Polite manipulation in meetings, advanced listening. Scenario: product rollout decision. Moderator: J. Polite manipulator: Colin, risking fast launch. Cautious voice: Mira, wants testing. Key moves and how to detect them. Colin's line: move. Risk. Corrective response: C2. I think we're broadly aligned that launching next Friday is the best direction. Premature consensus. Frames agreement before it exists, pressures dissenters. I'm not aligned on that yet. I'm aligned on the goal, but need risk addressed before supporting the timeline. I'd encourage us not to get stuck in analysis. The data is never perfect. Reasonable truth to shut down concern. Uses a general truth to invalidate a specific safety concern. I agree data isn't perfect. That's why we set thresholds. The question is whether minimum stability exists for a responsible launch. The threshold is a guideline, not a law. Rule bending. Invites ignoring standards without accountability. If we treat it as a guideline, let's define conditions that justify exceptions and required mitigations. I'd hate to lose momentum because we're chasing minor improvements. Minimization. Labels serious issues as minor. These aren't minor. Failures in core workflow increase support load and churn risk. Protect momentum by shipping stable rather than fast. We need to consider optics. Leadership may question our execution. Appeal to image. Shifts focus from product quality to fear of perception. Leadership will value stable outcomes. Delaying with a clear plan signals discipline, not weakness. Most people in the room are ready to ship. I don't want us to over-index on edge cases. Social pressure plus minimization. Makes disagreement feel abnormal, pressures conformity. Edge cases in core workflow affect retention. Addressing them now prevents future failures. C2 takeaways. Detect subtle framing. Polite manipulation often uses agreement, truth, and social cues to pressure you. Respond calmly and factually. Separate outcomes from perception. Correct misleading frames without escalation. Use conditional language, if, then, and thresholds show accountability. Classify severity. Avoid letting minimization undermine core risks. Anchor in facts and metrics. Focus conversation on measurable outcomes, not opinions or optics. Shadowing lines, practice. I'm not aligned on that yet. I support the goal, but risk must be addressed first. I agree the data isn't perfect. That's why we set thresholds. If we treat thresholds as guidelines, let's define conditions and mitigation plans. These aren't minor issues. They affect the core workflow and customer impact. Leadership values stable, measurable outcomes over quick optics. Edge cases matter. Addressing them now prevents compounding risk. Light bulb tip. Polite manipulation is about quiet control. Your C2 response is to name the move, reframe around outcomes, and propose metrics or conditions. You maintain collaboration while defending responsible decisions. Scenario: pricing rollout debate. Moderator: Teresa. Revenue leader: pushes fast Mark. Customer success leader: wants guardrails Amina. Product leader: neutral, seeks clarity Theo. Situation: launch next month versus careful pilot. Risk: churn and support overload. Opportunity: higher revenue. Polite manipulation/moves. Mark's line: move. Why it matters. C2 response: support will always be stretched. If we wait for a perfect moment, we'll never move. Perfection framing: suggests that waiting is impossible, hides minimum standards, pressures urgency. I'm not waiting for perfect. I'm asking for minimum readiness. If we launch without clear messaging, training, and escalation paths, we risk churn. Let's define minimum conditions and commit once met. Pilots are fine, but I don't want this to become another slow committee decision. We need decisiveness. Pressure plus dismissal. Labels caution as bureaucracy, pushes binary view. Decisiveness is important. We can be decisive while still defining clear guardrails and assigning ownership to prevent risk. The bigger risk is doing nothing. False dilemma/urgency. Ignores other intermediate options, pressures fast action. Doing nothing is one risk. Another is launching prematurely. Let's evaluate both and consider controlled pilots with success metrics. If we wait for a perfect moment, we'll never move. Perfection framing. Makes delay seem irrational. We're not waiting for perfect. We're ensuring readiness. Minimum standards protect outcomes while enabling timely action. C2 takeaways detect framing versus logic. Polite manipulation often sounds reasonable, will never move, but hides the pressure. Separate goal alignment from method alignment. Agree on the objective, update pricing, while challenging timeline assumptions. Use neutral questions. Which conditions would make you comfortable launching? Define minimum standards/guardrails. Protect outcomes without blocking action. Reframe urgency into structured steps. Controlled pilots, metrics, and ownership create safety while enabling decisiveness. Shadow/practice lines. I'm aligned on the goal, but we need minimum readiness before committing to a timeline. We're not waiting for perfect. We're asking for clear messaging, training, and escalation paths. Decisiveness matters. We can move fast while defining ownership and mitigation. Doing nothing is one risk. Launching prematurely is another. Let's evaluate both. Let's define thresholds and conditions before committing to action, so risk is controlled. Light bulb key habit: always anchor decisions in measurable outcomes and conditions. That neutralizes polite pressure without escalation and keeps you professional, calm, and credible. Key moves and concepts. Line/move. Skills/move. Why it matters. Upgraded/neutral response. Discussion is just avoidance. Framing/dismissal. Delegitimize caution as avoidance. Or it's risk management. Those are different. Let's clarify which risks we're addressing and how to mitigate them. We lose momentum, confidence, revenue. Multiple claims. Can overwhelm or shortcut analysis. Let's take them one at a time. Revenue depends on conversion and churn. Leadership confidence depends on execution. Momentum depends on internal alignment and messaging. I'm assuming we'll launch well. Confidence as evidence. Confidence isn't a plan. Neutral question: what would need to be true for a smooth launch, and how do we verify it before committing? Aligned on direction. Only disagreement is details. Premature consensus. Frames disagreement as trivial. I'm aligned on the goal, but the timeline is a core decision. Let's clarify risk and safeguards before committing. Hesitation is from risk-averse voices. Labeling/delegitimization attacks identity instead of evidence. This isn't about personality. Let's challenge the evidence, not the people raising it. Most customers won't care. It's common sense. Assumptions/appeal to common sense. Risks ignoring data. If this is true, let's verify with a small messaging experiment and measure cancellation or complaint rates. C2 shadowing/drill lines. I'm aligned on the goal. I'm not aligned on the timeline yet. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for minimum readiness. Let's take these claims one at a time and define success metrics. This isn't about personality. Let's focus on risk and evidence. What would need to be true for a smooth launch, and how do we verify it before committing? If we assume common sense, let's test it with quick experiments. Why this works. Separates goals from methods. You can agree on outcomes, but still challenge timelines or assumptions. Neutralizes polite manipulation. Don't escalate. Ask clarifying questions to expose hidden frames. Turns debate into design. Instead of arguing endlessly, define guardrails, staged rollout, and metrics. Focuses on measurable outcomes, minimum standards, checkpoints, and experiments make discussion actionable. Calm structural language. Avoids labels, absolutes, and identity attacks. Sounds professional and persuasive. Lightbulb C2 habit. Always anchor discussion in metrics, ownership, and safeguards, not just confidence, consensus, or assumptions. This is how you maintain authority while remaining collaborative. Final training segment, daily replay and reflex drill. This is your loopable ending. Short, clean, and designed to train calm, intelligent, and confident English thinking. Take a breath, sit up, and repeat these lines slowly at first, then naturally. I listen for the claim, the reason, and the move. I don't react to pressure. I respond with structure. I separate confidence from evidence. I separate urgency from proof. I ask for definitions before decisions. I ask for guardrails before commitment. I challenge ideas, not people. I can disagree respectfully and still stay firm. I can change my mind when evidence is strong. I can hold my ground when logic is weak. I don't need perfect English to speak clearly. I need clear thinking. Clear thinking creates clear English. Reflex drill. One-line upgrades under 3 seconds. Everyone knows this is true. If it's true, we should define success criteria and show evidence. You're overthinking it. I'm clarifying risk so we can move fast without rework. It's obvious. It may feel obvious, but let's test the assumption with data. There are only 2 options. I think there are more. Let's list them and compare trade-offs. That's just your opinion. It is. Let's evaluate it against measurable indicators. If you disagree, you're against progress. Disagreement is part of improvement. Let's compare evidence and refine the plan. We don't have time to debate. We have time to make one clear decision rule, which will save time later. This worked before, so it will work again. It might. Let's confirm conditions and test relevance today. I don't trust them, so their idea is wrong. Let's assess the idea on its merits and test it with a small pilot. If we delay, we'll fail. Delay can be costly. Let's quantify risk and choose the fastest responsible path. Leadership won't like this. Leadership cares about outcomes. Let's present metrics and guardrails. Most people agree with me. Consensus is useful, but let's surface objections to avoid assuming silence means agreement. It's common sense. Common sense is a starting point. Let's validate it quickly before committing. Stop asking questions. Questions reduce risk. The right questions help us make better decisions faster. We should launch now and fix later. We can move fast with a staged rollout and clear guardrails to protect trust. Viewer challenge. Pick one debate you heard today: AI hiring, climate policy, remote work, pricing rollout. Write one sentence for each. Name the move. Explain why it matters. Upgrade the argument. Post in the comments. If you want the next episode, tell me. Topic: negotiations, interviews, workplace conflict, public debates. Which move is hardest to catch? Straw man, false dilemma, slippery slope, or polite manipulation? Light bulb key habit. Training English under pressure is about thinking clearly first, speaking clearly second. You are building the brain behind the language. That is what makes fluency powerful.